So hey y'all, how you doing?
Good.
I hate quiet, just so y'all know that. I like it when you talk to me. It makes me feel like you're listening.
I'm muted only because me and Lorraine are really close to each other, but we're good. Good to see
Oh,
you.
I got you. Um, so today we are talking about educational options during COVID. Um, there's a couple things that I want to kind of cover from the jump in terms of how I teach. One, I like discussions. If you have a question, say, yo, I have a question. Don't hesitate. Don't let me go too far with you confused. Just say, hey, I have a question. Two, if you're like, okay, I get that in theory, but how does it work in real life? Um, I've probably done it, taught it, showed it, or had clients who did it. So just ask the question because we'll talk it out. Um, And with that being said, I really want this to be beneficial for you guys because there are so few places where you can really get a lot of these options from an unfiltered source that is only about the growth of your children and about the long-term, short-term, middle-term success of your children. So that's the goal. Um, so really quickly, I'm going to go through a couple of really basic definitions so we're all on the same page. Um, School at home. School at home is sometimes a method of beginning to homeschool, and it is when school ideology, classroom ideology is taken and dropped in your home. There are some school at home programs that you see on TV a lot that people falsely and incorrectly um, say are homeschool, but they are not. So, for example, when you see K12.com or Connections Academy, they say on their computers they are public school at home because they are not homeschool. They are school at home. What is the designation? The designation, quite simply and shortly put, is control. When you are dealing with school at home or a school at home program, um, which can also include distance education is school at home. Virtual learning is school at home. Um, Independent study is school at home. Anytime another entity is completely in charge of the what, the curriculum, the who, the when, the why, the how of your children, that is school at home. Homeschool means that you are in charge of that ship. It is your ship. You're the captain. You choose the curriculum. You choose when something is due. You determine when, why, and how your child will be evaluated. What is the purpose for the evaluation? What is the purpose for the grade? What is the purpose for not letting them redo something or allowing them to redo something? So homeschool versus school at home are two concepts that while they both take place in your living room, they are extraordinarily different lifestyles. And that is really important um, to have this noted for the context of this conversation. Just like the concept of an educational refugee is a very important concept to note for this conversation. Right now, we are a country full of educational refugees. A lot of people aren't deciding to move towards virtual learning, COVID learning, school at home, distance education, independent study, or homeschool because they want to. They're making those changes because they need to. And the why is huge. It is hugely important um, because most of us who end up homeschooling have the time and the privilege to research, to look at things, to observe, to do all of this. But with COVID, it was like, oh, it's March 15th. The world changed today. Let's look at this. So for those of you who are coming to this trying to find educational options for your child, because you're an educational refugee, the one thing I really do encourage is for you to practice grace for yourself and for your children. Okay? It doesn't have to be perfect. Rome wasn't built in a day, and no classroom teacher teaches every bit of curriculum that is in the textbook. It doesn't happen. It's not true. Don't try to do that. Don't try to be that. Don't try to give yourself that level of crazy. And if you meet a classroom teacher who tells you, oh, I hit every topic in my textbook, it either means they don't do it well or they're lying. Because I've never, have you met one, Tanya? Like, I've never met one who can honestly say, I teach all of this and teach all of it well. Now, did I maybe mention everything in the textbook once? Yes, but that doesn't mean I taught it. So please come to this understanding that grace is a huge part of this for you and your children. So educational options, there are a ton of them. The core to every single one of these options is the relationship that you grow and cultivate with your child. And I'm leading there because I know personally a lot of families where COVID schooling has caused a great strain in the parent-child relationship. And it's hard. It's really hard. And that's why we're leading here. Has anyone had that difficulty so far already? You feel free to unmute, say something, like you and your kids are like, it's going left. It is a very consistent issue. And it's not only consistent for COVID schoolers, it's very consistent for homeschoolers in the first year and a half to go through that. So you're not experiencing something that is abnormal, but here are some key components, because my number one priority is the emotional health of our families. Because we can always catch up on academics. It's a thing. And if we're really, really, really being honest about life, which we don't always want to when we are dealing with our children, there are some things that we learned in high school and middle school and elementary that were really, really critical to our development as an adult. There is a lot that was not. And sometimes we have to take the stuff that's not on the table off the table so that we can be okay. All right? So, how do we cultivate these relationships? Number one, every battle can be a battle. Sometimes you are literally just going to have to let things go. Now, this is a lot easier said than done when you're homeschooling versus when you're doing school at home. However, even when you're doing school at homes, you do have parental rights to put up boundaries for your children. You do have the right to talk to your education team and say, listen, my child is only doing X amount of, homework per day, and we are timing it by minute, not by quantity. As long as these minutes are quality minutes, this is all we are doing. It is not illegal. And in COVID, they are not going to jump off the cliff and try to flunk your child for it, especially if it's coming for you in writing. So set up safety limits for your child, because imagine when you were 14, 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, not only can you not go outside all summer, so your summer break wasn't a summer, you don't get to be with your friends, you don't get to go hang out at the pool or the lake or the beach or wherever it is that you go. All of a sudden, school's back in session, and now we're doing it from a computer for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And then after that, they have the nerve to give me homework. So then after that, I can not go outside and not hang out with the people I want to hang out with, not get that extra energy out, not get that busy out, not get that sadness out. And to mention, my mom has been yelling at me all day, and she used to be my safe place when I came home, but now she's just as bad as a teacher who's doing it all day. And I don't know who to turn to. That's the reality of being a child in COVID. We can't not be that safe place. And if that means telling the teacher, listen, when my kid looks like they are exhausted, you send me a text message so I can pull them off the computer for a while. Do that. My kids have classes. They have classes with special ed teachers. They have English classes. And all of the teachers know. They won't tell the children to pull them off, but they will send me a text message and say, hey, Cherina, Kendall's done today. We're having art at 2 o'clock. Why don't you have her log off and go play and have her log back in at 2? Because there's nothing in a moment of learning, in a single moment of learning, that's more important than my child's mental health during a pandemic. These are the things that will be written about and read about in 100 years, in 150 years, just like we read about the Black Plague. And I promise you, the footnote in the book is not going to be little Johnny didn't master his math facts when he was supposed to. The question is 20 years from now, is little Johnny going to be resilient, or is he going to be permanently triggered? Is he going to have severe anxiety for the rest of his life, or is he going to have developed coping tools? This is what we're dealing with. So we have to look at the big picture. Okay, because unless your kid is a senior, you have time. And if your kid is a senior, they already have the skill sets if you've been doing what you're supposed to do later or previously. Now, if things haven't been done and they're a senior, that's a whole lot to deal with, and the COVID's not the problem. I'm a straight shooter, if you didn't know, heads up. So if you have a kid who's young, let them be kids first, foremost, period. Okay, because there's no such thing as a first grader that needs to be attached to a computer for 6 hours a day. And you would be within your reason and your rights to tell your teacher, listen, I want my kid logged in for English. I want my kid logged in for math. I want my kids logged in for science. And for everything else, we're going to choose to opt out. If you would like to send home packets, you can. And the packets, we will send them home by the end of the semester, because I'm not having the stress of you looking for me to turn in a packet weekly. Because we might have decided, you know what, this family needs a break and we're going to the mountains this week. And we'll do that. Anyone have any questions so far? Anybody like lost? How do we do this? Everybody with me? Because y'all are blank. And it gives me anxiety talking to a bunch of blank screens, just so you know, because I feel like I'm slightly crazy. So, yes, Crystal Jones. The seniors have had a really rough time. If any of you guys have kids going into freshman year in college, oh God, give them grace. Give them a whole lot of grace. Love on them a little bit harder. Be a little extra patient because they are moody. They are moody and they are struggling, especially if your kid is like mine and she wanted to go be in the dorms, but she doesn't turn 17 until like 2 weeks after they have to sign the form for the dorms, and mom is not signing your life away. So you got to stay home. They're a little extra moody. The ones who have rising seniors who are gonna be seniors this year, love on them because they're scared. They just watch their friends lose everything and they don't know what they're going to lose, what they may lose, what they may not lose. Like Michaela and Sydney were in the process of having their dresses made for prom, and they're still at the dressmakers because they don't even want to go back and get them finished because they're afraid that they may never get to wear them. So you just have to constantly love on them and give, like, if your coworkers are having trouble with this, remember that your children, even if they're in 6-foot bodies, are still children and they're struggling harder. Okay, so that is super, super critical. Now, what does all of this have to do with educational options? Everything. Because the things that I'm talking about, you can make happen for your child regardless of where their settings are. The difference is how many other people you have to incorporate into the mix to get their needs met. As far as I'm concerned, COVID gives everybody a reason to request an IEP. Because find me a kid who doesn't have an emotional trauma right now, and I'll tell you the parents are lying about the status of their kid. So if your child doesn't have an IEP and the school's like, well, we would love to accommodate you, but they don't have an IEP, that's when you pull out the letter that's pre-written in your back pocket or the email that's pre-written in your folder and say, okay, I request an IEP meeting within 30 days, and I request testing for, anxiety, this, that, and the other. And then you do everything in your power to tick your kid off the day before the day of the IEP meeting. I'm dead serious. Y'all are laughing. Don't send them in there in a good mood, because think about it. When you're struggling with your child, is it when your kid is in the best mood or the worst? So why do we bring them for these evaluations in the best mood? Like, we take them and give them McDonald's and make them all happy. If that's not what you're doing on a normal day, don't take them in that condition, right? So, like me, I kind of make them mad on purpose before an evaluation. And I tell my kids, like, listen, you don't have to be abundantly nice. Say what you want, say what you mean. Like, you're not going to get in trouble from me, because I want them to see the raw, not the show that the children sometimes put on when they're with other people. Because I'm the one at home dealing with you now. You guys are the ones at home dealing with your kids now, right? So they need to catch that heat that we catch when they're just like losing their minds. That's what they need to feel. So almost any kid can get by on getting a 504 and IEP right now, especially for anxiety, mental health, depression, things like that. Those are all reasons to have an IEP. I mean, in theory, every child should have an IEP, but that's not what IEPs are made for every child. Um, like, that would be kind of, I mean, from a child standpoint, it's great. From a teacher school standpoint, it would be almost impossible, because they're not funded well enough. And honestly, as a teacher, you don't pay us enough to have 30 completely different learning plans in a classroom at the same time, and 160 every day. So when we want to have that discussion, we also need to have the discussion about paying people to actually implement them well. Because an IEP that is not well written, and an IEP that cannot or will not be implemented is just a wasted piece of paper. IEP concerns, how would we go to my webpage and book an IEP session or a consult, and we can go over how to like justify that at the Melanin Unschoolers on Facebook. So this is why I say we're starting with emotional needs, because regardless of if your child is doing independent study, if your child is doing homeschool, if your child is doing school at home, if your child is doing direct learning, if your child is doing internet learning versus online instruction, because internet learning and online instruction are not the same. Online instruction is live. A lot of parents think it's better. My kids personally do not like it better. My kids prefer internet learning, where they have a system where they can go back and rewatch a video 26 times or rewatch a problem 26 times, and they don't have the distractions of the other kids in the class. Because what they find is the amount of material that's covered with 20 kids online in a classroom that takes an hour takes them 20 minutes if they're doing it by themselves. And home education done well takes a lot less time than public instruction. Does everybody know that, or does anyone need a breakdown of that day, the difference? Does anyone need that breakdown, or is everybody familiar with it? Let me know. Do the breakdown. Okay, so your average school day, depending on your district, is between 6.5 to 8 hours of school, right? Again, it varies, large country. The average homeschool family does 3 to 4 hours a day for their oldest children, and I mean high schoolers. Why is it different? Because public education, and by public I mean traditional education, so let me rephrase that. Traditional education is a highly inefficient model. So when we look at a day in a traditional school, each class is what, 50 minutes, 53 minutes, depending on the school. Some schools are nice and they give you 5-minute passing periods. Some schools make you try to go to the bathroom in 3 minutes and get across campus. It varies. So let's say each class is 55 minutes, right? Because they have a 5-minute passing period for each day. At the beginning of each class, it takes about 5-6 minutes to settle in. At the end of each class, it takes about 5-10 minutes to clean up, settle in, get the desks back where they were going, especially if it's group work involved, yada, 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 write down the homework, yada, yada, yada. Now, let's take maladaptive behavior. So the kid in the class who the teacher has to say, Johnny, quit it. Johnny, quit it. Johnny, quit it. Okay, that's it. I'm calling the SRO. Johnny, quit it. Johnny, quit it. Let's take away 5-10 minutes away for that in class. And that's a pretty controlled class if you're only spending 5-10 minutes on discipline. Let's keep it real. Now, let's talk. We have passing periods. We have lunch periods. We have recess. Right? We have bye period. We have the time your kid is spending waiting for other people to finish their work. Or we have the time your kid is sitting waiting for someone to explain to them what they're doing while they're explaining it to someone else. By the time you break down all of those hours, the average instruction that your child actually has is about 4.5 hours a day. The average instruction that is direct into your child is about 45 minutes to an hour and a half a day. So if my kid is getting direct instruction for an hour and a half a day and I double that, I can do everything that they do and more in a day. And I have. So for those of you who don't know, my oldest senior, who I just let graduate, she's been eligible to graduate since her freshman year, after her freshman summer, because there are ways to do things and be more efficient. We just didn't allow her to graduate. So as an idea, in California, it's 220 credits to graduate. She graduated with 459-ish credits, around 459 she graduated with. So she basically could have graduated more than twice. But we don't rush her out because she wasn't ready. And it doesn't make financial sense to rush them out. Because it's better for them to stay, because as long as you're registered in high school, you get free JC classes. So why am I going to make you graduate early? So when we look at these models of how the school system is built up, does anyone see a reason for their 6-year-old to be sitting at a computer right now for 4, 5, 6 hours a day? For what? Right? Because especially the amount of individualized instruction goes down in most cases the younger the child is. Because kindergartners take a whole lot of wrangling. It's like a little rodeo they got going in the where they're always like, come on, I have to go to the bathroom. I have to do this. I have to do that. So we have a system that is not built efficiently. And homeschoolers who have been doing it for a long time, because most homeschoolers start with a long day. And then everything blows up. And most of us start with a long day because we didn't go through a process called deschooling. And then it blows up. And we're like, why am I so tired? Why am I exhausted? Why are these kids so exhausted? And why are other homeschoolers happy? Because my kids are over here miserable. What am I doing wrong? And 9 times out of 10, what you're doing wrong is you're spending all day working, when really you only need 3 quality hours. If you really want to push the envelope 4, to maximize and exceed what is done in a traditional school. My senior and my now she'll be a junior when she starts school in a couple weeks. In 4 hours a day, they exceed their peers in the traditional system. My sophomore is a sophomore in college, and she's eligible for graduation. And she has another 2 years to go. And her schedule is more relaxed than the older child's schedule. So why am I telling you this? Because when we're looking at options, it's really important to understand what is possible. Because a lot of times people say, oh, it's possible if your kid's a genius. It's possible if this. It's possible if that. Lorraine, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am. When my kids first came to BYLP years ago, what was my fear?
What was your fear? Something you thought that they wouldn't participate. You thought that they would
because of their disabilities.
Yeah, and you thought that they couldn't handle it, the amount of programming that we were throwing at them, and so it became one of those things where you wanted to hover over them instead of just let them be. And so I got Mama out the room and we let them be.
She gave me a room of my own to work with other kids so she could steal my kids away. She thought she was slick. But why am I sharing this? Because our children, and I say our because Michael's sitting right here, and a lot of you guys have met Michael throughout the week. Our children were not, like, every child is genius if you judge them on their genius, right? But my children aren't what you would consider classic genius. They're not children who didn't have severe learning disabilities. They're not like, if they have severe, I mean 50, 60-page IEPs. We have children with severe anxiety. We have children with autism. We have children with executive functioning delay. We have ADHD. We have ADD in the house. So my children are by no means the academic dream child where everything just came easy. Like, my kid who just graduated was the one who didn't read till the 4th grade. Am I telling you this to shame them? Of course not. But I am telling you this because you are built for whatever you choose to do for your child. And your child is built for whatever you choose to do for them. Because a big part of their success is the fact that we finally learned, and I finally learned, to back up and allow joy in. Because as Black parents and parents of Black children, we are often quite afraid to be joy-led because we're like, the world's going to get them. The world's going to get them. The world's going to get them. Yes, but also, if we don't teach them joy, where are they going to learn it? If we don't allow them to learn to love reading, when are they going to learn to love it? If we don't allow them to breathe and have a safe space, where are they going to learn that they deserve a safe space? You ever met someone who's so lost that they don't understand that they deserve better? Well, sometimes we create that in our children. We don't teach them that they deserve better because they don't necessarily have the opportunity to know that they have better. So any child, regardless of special need, can thrive. And it's about choosing your academic options. So what are the options that we have now? The big ones are virtual schools or virtual learning through your public school, which basically means you have a teacher in the classroom and they're going to try to do what we're doing right now for 8-9 hours a day. And the reason I say 9 is because when the kid doesn't understand something, then you have tutoring and after school sessions and yada, yada, yada. So we have virtual learning. Option 2 is distance learning. Distance learning can be virtual or not virtual. Okay? Distance learning can be old school distance learning where your kid is given the textbooks and a certain number of assignments every week, and by the end of the week they have to turn that in. Any school can accommodate virtual learning right now, and every school district already has a virtual learning department or school in their school that has been there for probably no less than 60 years. 60. Virtual or distance learning has happened for a very, very, very long time. Distance learning is also what we refer to as independent study. And a lot of times we look at the independent study schools like, oh, that's where those kids go. But some of my brightest kids have been, distance learning students, and it works really well for them because they don't got to be bothered. They get their work, they knock it out, they do it on their own term, on their own time, they turn it in and they get what's next. And a lot of them actually thrive and finish quite early because they're not dealing with all of those distractions that we spoke about during the day. So we have independent study or distance learning, we have virtual learning, we have COVID schooling, which is what a lot of people are trying to do right now, where they're trying to do brick and mortar on weird day schedules, half on, half off. The one thing I'm going to say specifically for Black families is this. I don't encourage it. There is going to be no middle ground in my statement. I don't encourage it. I do understand that some people have a need because they feel like there's childcare as that, but I'm going to ask this question. Is COVID schooling, is your child going to campus for 1 or 2 days a week worth the fact that it makes it a very real possibility that your child may or may not have access to their grandparents and their elders for the next year or 2 years. And if they do, you are now risking multi-generational death in your families. And it's hard to hear and it's hard to say, but no one's saying it, but I am, because I don't pay for these. I don't work for this school district. I say what I feel like it. So I don't encourage it unless it is your absolute positive last ditch. I don't have a choice. Don't send your babies to these classrooms. Because have you ever seen, I mean, my classroom is pretty well disciplined. I'm a really good teacher. And I even had some issues occasionally with students, because children are children and children are whole autonomous humans. And they are not tiny robots. So show me a classroom where a student is never going to be within 6 foot of another, where they're never going to borrow a pencil, where the piece of papers that aren't all stacked up. So you go, the teacher collects the papers. Now she has a stack of everybody's germs on her desk. She corrects them and gives them all back. Everybody's contaminated now. So why are we 6 feet apart? So that being said, I will never personally recommend that, but it's an option. So there's that. So then there's COVID schooling. Then there's traditional homeschooling. And then there's school at home, which is also referred to as school in a box, where you can call K-12 or Connections Academy or wherever, and they will literally deliver a big box of curriculum, every supplies you can possibly need, down to the computer. The problem is a lot of times their learning happens to be culturally irrelevant and fueled with busy work. If you feel that that is the path for you, do not go through K-12. It's torture. Like it is torture. Connections Academy is a much, much, much better option than K-12. So if you have an option at all, I highly suggest Connections Academy. Now, if you are in California and you choose to homeschool, there's a couple of routes for you. Some of them are quite limited right now because the waiting lists are astronomical. But I'm still going to encourage you to be on the waiting list, because people who don't get to sit with people like me to teach them how to do this quit. And it happens every year, because there are wait lists every single year for these charter programs. So for those of you who are just on the wait list for the first time, don't feel discouraged. We go through this. Well, in order to get in, we go through this every single year, and there's always a wait list of 200-300. The only difference is now is like 600-700. But people will quit. They are hiring teachers actively. They are trying to beef up. Do pay attention to what's happening in your state legislatures, because, like, for example, right now, the California state legislature is trying to change funding options for new families while keeping funding for old families. So they don't piss off current homeschoolers, because they know that people who are already homeschooling, there's usually a parent home, so people have the time and the energy just to mess with them at the Capitol. So instead of saying we're changing what homeschool funding looks like for all homeschoolers, they're just saying only the ones who are new won't get the same level of funding and support as the ones who've been there. And I think that is ridiculous. So do take the time to look into that and to call your representatives and tell them that this is not okay. We are in a pandemic, and the health and of our children come first, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to preserve local school districts. They're trying to preserve local school districts. And the only problem is if school districts were in the same place cutting edge wise as these charter schools were, people wouldn't be in a rush to leave. So when we have all of these options, how do you know what is for you? That is the $1 million question. So when you're in California, you have the option of a charter school. Get on all the waiting lists for all the charter schools. Some of the big ones in Northern California or throughout California, Visions Academy is throughout California. In Northern California, you have Rio Valley Charter or other PCI institutes. That's what they're called. If you go to PCI, type in PCI schools, California, you'll find them. There is Connections Academy. There is Connecting Waters. There is a whole bunch of them. So look into them, get on your waiting list. Option 2, And option 2 is kind of 2 options. The option 2 is to file a private school affidavit, a PSA. Basically, in California, technically, there are no homeschoolers. So all of our homeschoolers are either A, under a charter school, and the charter provides funding and support, or under a PSA, which is a private school affidavit, which basically means your home is now a private school, and you do what you do. There is a third option. The third option is rarely used, but some people do use them, and there are some really good reasons to use them. The third one is an umbrella, filing under an umbrella school, where you pay the umbrella school to join their school. And I am not an expert in New York, Jacinia. I'd have to look up that law. So you would have to pay the umbrella school to join their school. And a lot of times they're like co-ops where you get access to certain things, people, but a lot of them are very, very, very not for us. One exception is RBG Academy in Southern California. So if you're in SoCal, RBG Academy is a really amazing umbrella option. So those are the 3 main options. Now, how do we decide homeschool, school at home, virtual learning, distance learning? Really, it's about your child and it's about your household. Out of all of the needs, out of all the needs, homeschool offers the most flexibility. It offers the most freedom. It offers the most flexibility. It offers the most control over what your children learn and when and how they learn it. The other options offer varying amounts of controls that lessen the closer they get to the public school. So the next most open choice would be school at home. Because with those programs, unless you sign up for classes, or the school in a box, unless you sign up for classes, your child basically has what they have to do every day. And as long as it happens in that 24-hour period, cool. But again, you don't choose that curriculum. The next option would be distance learning via computer. So online learning. This would be the option where, again, much like school at home, this is what the assignment is from your child's teacher. They have a due date. They get it done by this due date. But you don't have any influence over how much, the quantity, the quality, the grades, the output, the who, what, when, where, why. You don't have control there. But they do have control, like as long as it's due by this due date at midnight, straight. Then you have virtual learning, where the class is meeting from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and they just online from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and you don't have any control in that. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Because I want to make sure that you got any questions you are coming with, you leave answered.
The question I got was, is this presentation only for California or is it open to others?
It's open. Ask the question.
Ask your question. And stop. Don't text me. Ask it.
No, it wasn't, because there was a lot of information about California specifically. I've looked regarding my state.
What state is that?
I live in Georgia.
Georgia is relatively open.
Yeah,
I
know a lot of people do homeschool here.
Yeah. Georgia is one of the easier states to homeschool in. It's one of the states where I have a lot of clients that I work with in Georgia. So if you have questions, I can probably answer them. The only reason I break it down slightly different for California is because a lot of the audience is from California, 1, and 2, California's kind of a unicorn when it comes to homeschooling. Our laws are weird because we don't technically have homeschoolers. So you kind of have to break that down, because what has happened in the past is people have said, oh, I'm homeschooling. And then when they look up our state laws, they don't see it. So they think, oh, I just keep my kids home. And then they come and get arrested. because now you are out of compliance with state and child welfare laws.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Whereas other states, because they have homeschooling entities, it's much easier to find out when you type in and go to the Department of Education for Georgia and you type in homeschooling, it tells you exactly how to register your kid as a homeschooler. In California, you don't get that.
Okay.
In New York, you probably got to look at New York City and New York State.
Yeah, New York is a unicorn in its difficulty, and it literally depends on what part of New York you're in, the city, the state, because New York City has different rules. So New York is just it's a whole thing. Florida, Florida's relatively easy. Florida's an easy state to homeschool in, just like Georgia. Most of your Republican states are very easy to homeschool in. The states that tend to be more difficult to homeschool in are your liberal states. Please explain deschooling. So deschooling is when you decide to homeschool. Deschooling is the concept of decolonizing your thoughts and your children's thought process about what it means to learn and what education looks like. If you don't deschool and your kids are like, so for example, my kids spent a couple hours in the garden this morning, kind of just looking like they were doing random things, right? Before I was deschooled, I'm like, oh, look, they're outside playing in the garden. Now I see that they've learned, oh, we have to like get the dead things off the trees so they'll grow. We have to prune them. We have to do this. We have to do that. And you start finding the value in what they are doing. Another example of deschooling is because we often miss the value, right? How many of you guys see your kids doing stuff and you're like, they just over there doing nothing, right? So for example, our son, he loves YouTube, right? He will watch parades on YouTube. He loves Disney parades and he loves video games. And he will watch the parade from every country on the planet. And it looks like, oh, he's wasting time. Until you realize that the boy speaks Japanese because he wanted to beat a video game and the tutorial was in Japanese. Until you realize that he understands the words to all of the Disney parade songs in like 6 different languages because he loves these parades. He is learning. And for him, it's active learning. We have one daughter who really, 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 really hates to read. She's a teenager. She's competent at it. She doesn't enjoy it. But she really, really, really likes money. So she started like 3 businesses. And while it just looks like she's making a mess in the kitchen, she's made some amazing soaps and some amazing body scrubs and some amazing candles. And she's now packaged them and she's been actually reading books about entrepreneurship and building a brand and branding. But at first, it just looked like she was making a mess in my kitchen. And had I not let her make the mess in the kitchen, she wouldn't have got down to the reading, right? So deschooling is the process of doing those things. It's also the process of learning to let go. Because remember when we discussed that relationship piece, right? It's real easy to want to take control of what they're doing. But when you're with someone 24/7, imagine if your husband was like, what were you doing 8 minutes ago? Why were you doing that for 8 minutes instead of 4? Well, what are you fitting to do in 7 minutes? What are we doing in 26 minutes? When we think teacher, a lot of times that's where our mind goes as parents. But when parents do that, especially when you have tweens and teens, all of a sudden it becomes this. And then your whole household is just miserable. And we're on quarantine. We don't want miserable households. We want happy households. Okay, the kitchen maybe almost got blown up. It's okay. Nobody's dead. There's no fire on the ceiling. And we have really great smelling candles, right? Clean it up. Whereas before deschooling, it's don't make the mess. Now it's clean it up. Because then when the response is clean it up, it later then becomes, and for my household, it's usually at like 11:50 at night, a knock on the door. So Mom, I spent this much on these candles and I have 24. So as long as I sell the candles for $6, I make a profit. But I think I want to sell them for $12 and then have an upgraded wick option that's soaked in essential oil for $15, and we can have 2 like layers. So you have a premium and a regular edition. Do you think that's a good profit margin? And then I have to look up what it means to have a profit margin to say, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like I think it's beautiful. What else can you do? Basically, if nobody's dead and nobody went to jail, it's a win today. So then it opens the door for those discussions, because they know, oh, she just watched me almost blow this up. Now it's like, oh, she supports me. Let me let this grow. Where can this go? Where can this business go? So Sydney, for those of you who don't know her, she is the 16-year-old now. Sydney has 3 separate businesses, and all of them are profitable. And I haven't put any money in any of her businesses except for the initial, and I think I gave her $200 with the first one, and she turned that into 3. So, you know, she's the kind of kid, like if anybody has ever watched Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, worst nightmare is a 9 to 5 at a desk. That's my Sydney. So deschooling is all about allowing yourself to see the joy in what learning really looks like, because learning is not the same as education. And learning is the priority. You want a lifelong learner as a child, because the best humans we have on our planets are humans that are always learning. It's not about the academics. It's not about the education, because all that will come. Healthy children learn. And if as parents, we say, instead of saying, oh, you have to do this, because like I tell my kids all the time, you ain't gotta do nothing but stay black and die. Now, if you want to go, so perfect example, Michaela. Lorraine can tell you, Michaela, my oldest, is the queen of petty. If you would have asked 2 years ago, is Michaela going to college? I would have been like, probably. But it took one person to question her intelligence. And Michaela was like, remember like 2 years ago when they had that Facebook post going around about the girl and the teacher and the mom put all the admissions letters and made kind of a blanket, and they were like 35 and she got like 1 million likes. And Michaela was like, I can do that. And someone said, oh, can you? And Michaela was like, okay, I'm going to do double. And everybody thought it was a joke till she came home with 84 admissions. And then I'm like, do you want me to put it online? She was like, no, because it was about proving that person wrong. I don't want it on the internet because I don't want people to bother me. And when other organizations are like, oh, can we do a story on you? She's like, listen, unless it's Lorraine and BYLP, no, because no one else was there. No one else was present. When she was melting down with me, she called Lorraine. So deschooling is all about that. It's all about learning what your boundaries are with your kids, understanding that you do have boundaries because you can't be everything. And then putting people in place in their life to take that up. So I have a friend named Ginger. My kids know if they want to make soap or something like that, I'm okay. But if they really need help, they call Ginger. If they need help with the math, they call Ginger. If I'm not hearing them and they just need somebody neutral who they know I'll listen to, they'll call Lorraine. Give them those tools. Because saying that you have to be everything for your child is as much as saying that you are the only person who was ever allowed to be comforting to your spouse. Like your spouse shouldn't have a friend. Like you shouldn't have a friend. You shouldn't have an outlet. You shouldn't have a safe place. And you can either say, listen, these are safe people to do that, or you have to trust who they go to in the street. So deschooling is so much deeper than just about education. It's really a decolonization of our parenting. And it's the conscious choice to say, I'm going to create a village. I'm going to bring in a village. And learning is going to happen all through that village. Okay? How would you help a 4-year-old but has an older sister in distance learning? What do you mean? Can you be more specific? Tanya, just talk to me and stop typing. I don't care if it's noisy.
I'm sorry, we're really close and I didn't want the feedback. Okay, so I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 4-year-old did 2 years of learning at home before she went to school. She had 1 year and then COVID hit. The 4-year-old, however, has never done any schooling, no at home, well, not much of at home schooling or anything. Now the 6-year-old is now going to school, but online. The 4-year-old, who does not have the attention span of the 6-year-old, now wants to do schooling like sister. So how would you go about
honestly? You couldn't pay me
teaching
to
that
make
4-year-old, knowing that she's not going to be online, you know, from the 8 to 3 or 8:15 3?
Well, what does the 6-year-old schedule look like? Do we know what the 6-year-old schedule is going to look like?
Rena?
Do we know what the 6-year-old schedule is going to look like?
Yes.
What does it look like?
What does it look like in forms of what? I have it here with me.
What is the day? 9 to or 8 to what?
She's not. I can't hear Cherina though.
What
As far
time
as
does
the
it start?
hours?
Uh-huh.
Okay. From 8:15 to 2:30.
No, ma'am.
So she does have breaks in between.
Okay.
Like she has independent study from 9 to 10:30, and then she's back online, and then independent study again from 11:30 to 12, and then there's a lunch break for an hour, lunch and recess, and then she's back with independent study from 1:30 to 2:30.
Now, is independent study where they're doing what they want, or is the teacher telling them what to do during that time?
Hold on, Cherina, I can't hear you.
The independent study, are the children doing what they want during that time, or is the teacher saying during this time you do X, Y, and Z?
I believe they are going offline with instructions. It's not go bake a cake to learn math. You know what I mean?
Do they have to do it? Is there anything that's keeping them enrolled?
Parents are keeping them enrolled. It's
Who's
not
the parent?
Excuse me?
Who's the parent?
Family members.
I'll give them a half-hour consultation to talk them out of it. I'm serious.
You are, and I appreciate it.
Because it's not going to be in the best interest of their household.
Yes.
The 6-year-old is going to be burnt out because that's a lot of independent study time. That's a lot. Especially if it's, oh, you're going to go and do what I'm telling you to do during this time, and then I'm supposed to like struggle through these worksheets and then go back and refocus on a computer. No, ma'am.
And with a 4-year-old who wants to do schooling like Sissy.
No.
So Sissy can read and know her numbers and letters and the whole nine, where 4-year-old, not so much.
And the 4-year-old, I would just kind of let her be a lurker. Like, if you have to do it, let her lurk. Make extra copies of the worksheets. She's probably not going to do much on them, but she can have them. Or you can slide her similar but different copies of the worksheets.
Okay.
And let her kind of get her hands on. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's just not like ages 0 to 8. That's the age of exploration.
Okay.
And so much more is learned by doing, exploring, feeling, touching, drawing, playing, singing, all of these things, that just the concept of, okay, we have an hour together and then go do this for an hour and a half and then an hour, like, no. I don't see it as emotionally healthy for anybody. And I see the parent losing their mind. Like, my kids only have sessions a couple times because they have special ed. And to be honest, I'm not as consistent as I should be with them because I'm just like, I'm not doing that today. Because if they're doing it, I'm doing it.
Exactly. So
emotionally, for everyone in the house, it's going to be a high stress situation. And it really just, it's especially when they're so young, they have years to catch up at 4 and 6. That's what, first grade and pre-K?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They can catch me in 2022.
I actually have a quick question.
Thank you.
So I'm a speech therapist, new speech therapist in Elk Grove.
We need you.
And I am you know, in the conversations that you guys are having, and I know the reality, right? I serve low income communities. So that means those families, right? They have to work. They don't have the privilege of being able for one of the members of the families to stay home. And if they have to make that sacrifice, then they're stressing about a million other things, right? So on top of that though, right? Like I have laws that I have to abide by. I have minutes that I have to meet. I have, you know, specific instructions of how I'm supposed to give therapy. So I guess my question is like, in the public schools, working with parents, because now parents are the teachers, right? Like at this point with distance learning, like the load is pushed on them. As much as I can do from a screen, like, all right, I'll do it. Right. But my question is, how do I give my parents that grace and like still meet?
You write the IEP properly.
Okay.
Make sure to write the IEP. So the minutes include, you want to make sure the speech IEP minutes include consultation.
Okay. Yeah.
That way you can count that as your minutes and as their minutes, but the parents can go home and do it.
Okay.
And then also put not only consultation, but when you put your one-to-one, write it per semester. So minutes per semester. So that way when the kid is having a rough day, you are legally within your rights to cut off time and say, you know what, Johnny, you did really good today. And I see you had a hard day. Let's time this.
Right.
And then you can come back and add an extra 10 minutes the following week or something like that. So by giving yourself the broadest parameters possible, while giving them the maximum minutes possible, it allows you that flexibility and it allows parents that flexibility. Okay. So when the mom says, oh, I have to pick up a shift on this day and I know we usually have time, they're not just losing that hours and you're not just losing that hour. It can be moved. So really it's going to be about writing the IEP well.
Okay. See, my only thing is like I don't on top, because the students that I serve, it's moderate to severe autism. And so and
which program are you at?
I'm with Elk Grove Unified.
So you're just with the district as a whole. You're not like,
yeah, and they have like a specific program. It's called PALS, which
know it well.
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions about it. I'll tell you that.
It derived from the Kendall School.
All of it's ABA based.
Yes.
It's totally ridiculous. It's turning kids into robots. I don't agree. And so, as you know, I'm all about naturalistic therapy, all about it. Like I'll take my kids to the dirt and the grass and have them picking up piles of mud. And, you know, for me, that is learning. That's communication, you know? But I guess my fear is I don't want to bombard parents with these like, you know, I have to have some kind of proof, but I don't want to bombard parents with all these worksheets or, you know, these.
What you do is you offer them. Because you will get parents like me who'll be like, I ain't doing it. And you let them know it's fine.
Yeah.
Because your job is to give it to them. You can't make us turn it back in. So you say, listen, I know you have a ton on your plate. Can you get this to me by, and then give them like a month or two.
Okay.
And then even then, because we have multiple autistic children in this house. So when they would like the ABC forms, I ain't doing that. Yes. You know, so just give it to them and then offer grace.
Okay.
Give it to them. And from the beginning, say, listen, I'm here for you. I'm here to serve you. I understand that it is hard. I understand it's difficult. This is what I'm required to do. And I also understand if you have to decline sometimes, that's fine. Because by law, they can decline. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just make sure that they know that. And that will go a long way for your relationship.
Okay.
Crystal, do you want to clarify your question just a little bit? Can you get on the mic? Okay, well, either type it in or chime in when you can. Honey, your hand's up?
Yes, I had a question in the chat about the letter of intent. So the schools here in Florida have been calling me to see if my children were returning. I have not answered their question. but I do plan on homeschooling them. So can you explain to me, like, when the letter of intent should be sent, what should be on it? Like, I know it's 30 days before the school starts, but
Do
is that
any of your
before?
kids have special needs?
No, or not on paper, I should say.
Okay, so then let me ask this question. Are you going to get them on paper before you go?
I'm not exactly sure the route to go about it. Like, I know my daughter is ADHD, and so is my son. Like,
How old is she again, honey?
she's 12.
Okay. So
And
if
then
they
the
were
boy
staying
is
in public
7.
school, would you be seeking an IEP for the ADHD?
She does pretty well in, like, she does, you see what I'm saying? Like, she does well in that part. It's just the attention kind of, like, it's kind of hard to keep her focused.
Okay, so in that case, you probably aren't going to seek an IEP, which means you can do it whenever you would like to do it. Double check with your state. Like California has a cutoff of October 15th to file ours. Some states you can do it all year. Some states you have to do it by a certain date. If you know for a fact you're going to do it, I'd do it sooner than later because Florida has some grant funding options for homeschooling that you can sometimes find. I've had a couple clients who've been successful with that, and I know those deadlines come in August, but you have to have already filed.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. So then here's another question. After I send the letter of intent, it's like, 30 days after that, then the schooling process is supposed to start. So would that then be where I begin to deschool them?
Yeah, I mean,
Because,
you
like,
can
right
start
now
that
they're on
now.
summer break.
Yeah, because deschooling counts as school. Deschooling absolutely counts as school as long as you are keeping and creating a record. One of the easiest ways to keep a record of what you are doing with your kids, especially if you're like me and you don't especially love record keeping, is create a private Facebook page just for you and your kids, especially if your kids are older. And then as they do things, as you share articles, as you guys have experiences, think about it. It takes a half a second to take a picture and upload it and save it. And now you have it date, time, place, links, right? So that's a really good way to do it. That way, when it comes time to turn in paperwork to the state or to be audited or something like that, you have everything for the last year in one place, including pictures, and you can upload work samples and PDFs and all of that. So it becomes a really efficient tool.
Okay.
So, okay, I can't get on the mic. My question is, I would love to pull my girls out, but they are not on board due to them already being on Teams. How can I help to support them with distance learning and moving forward with computer classes? I mean, what teams are you going? What teams are they going to be on during COVID, Crystal? I guess that would be my question, because to me, ain't no team on COVID. Even if the school has a team, you ain't on a team during COVID because we're not risking your life for gain. But with that being said, how can you support them in distance learning? Those boundaries we discussed in the beginning, creating the boundaries with the teachers, allowing the kids to know what their boundaries are, pulling them out of classes that maybe aren't super necessary and getting them the minimum schedule required, so they can really focus on the classes that they have to do, because if they're in high school, they don't necessarily have to take 6 or 7 classes per term. And just creating a schedule that is functional for their best effort, for them to give their best effort, and for them to still stay sane. But really, I would have the hard discussion. A lot of our kids have been somewhat shielded from what COVID really means. Like, the question might have to be asked, okay, if you want to play this sport, you might not be able to see grandma for X number of months or years. Things like that. So hopefully that answers your question. If you need me to follow up, just let me know. Summer, you have a hand?
Yeah, I was just going to say two things. One kind of leads into Crystal's question, but first of all, I want to say thank you because you're de-schooling. One of my children is on here as well. Patricia's my daughter, the speech pathologist, and my son's off somewhere else. But that's how my kids have been raised. Like we've gone from duct tape, wallet, you know, at a farmer's market to right now it's cookie starting industry or something.
We went through that duct tape phase.
Let me get there.
So what is your question, Summer?
Oh, my internet.
Or comment?
Oh, I lost it for a second. Sorry. Oh, there we go. It came back on. But the other, sorry, so what I wanted to say to Crystal is I'm also a public school administrator. Of course, when I go to talk, my internet's going to go out.
We can still hear you.
Oh, Yvonne?
Back on.
Yes.
I'm back on. So I'm a public school administrator, and I wanted to just remind parents that you are in control still in a public school. So my son's a 12th grader, similar to what Crystal said. He is tied to his high school. He's not interested in leaving. We've taken some outs a few times, but he wants to be there. And he got his schedule today. The first thing I did was contact all his teachers, reminded them he has a 504, reminded them that he's not going to be online for 5 hours a day, that I will supplement his learning, and that, you know, whatever we need to do to make that happen, that I'm here to support them and to support him. But again, as a public school administrator, I want to remind parents that just because it's a public school doesn't mean you don't have a say.
Absolutely. I think the big part is a lot of people are sometimes afraid to have a say. You know, when I was an administrator, I'd be the administrator. This is, tell me X, Y, and Z so I can say okay. And they're like, oh. So yes, I definitely understand that. Thank you for reiterating that. It's really important to take control. Yvonne?
Hi. I guess I kind of would be considered a fly on the wall. I work for the Department of Education here in California.
I said, hey, DOE.
And well, the State Department, CDE.
Okay.
And I work with independent study and alternative schools of choice, which is this is why I want to be on this conference call. Since COVID, it's changed a lot of things. One of the things I get many calls from parents, and there's a misconception that they think distance learning is exactly the same thing as independent study. They're not the same. Exactly. A lot of people use the term independent study because they think you're independent, you're by yourself, and you're doing your lessons. According to the state, independent study is a specific ed code with specific protocols and requirements, which right. People don't understand. It's like, oh, put my kid in independent study. Time out, you don't know what that entails. And it's voluntary. A lot of schools, they have the option whether they want to offer it or not. And so a lot of people are calling me asking, I want to put my child in independent study. At the state, I can't do anything. That's a local decision. And the school can decide they don't want to have independent study, or they do. Right now, a lot of them are trying to do independent study. You are correct. A lot of them do it real sloppy. I've seen some good ones because I've had to travel up and down the state. And I've seen some really good independent studies, mainly in Southern California. Mm-hmm. They almost look like Waldorf type schools. Also, the other program was Alternative Schools of Choice, which was written into the Ed Code back in 1979. And very few people learned about this until COVID. Now it's going crazy. It's where parents, teachers, and the students can come together and create a school within the school district. And it's an Ed Code that's kind of been under the wraps, but now everybody's looking at this. But they're doing it real sloppy. And in that Ed Code, it talks about so that the children can learn with joy. When you mentioned joy, I saw that. And it's like, where do you see joy?
That's what they're organizing a lot of these pods under, correct?
I think so. There's a lot of different schools being organized under the Alternative Schools of Choice, such as Waldorf-like or...
I'm trying to get Laureen to organize a school for me. I'll run it as long as I don't have to go to board meetings.
If you could get a district to say, a lot of districts right now are looking, they're doing these alternative schools of choice. If you can find a district, the thing is you still have to follow some of the school, many of the school rules, the district rules, but you can be a little bit more creative. And I think I've seen a lot of people do a lot more of that. So that's really something I think people needed to know. It's like distance learning is something, we don't have an ed code for that. That's kind of like the wild, wild west right now. And
it's very like, and people always look at me crazy when I'm like, no, that's not distance learning. That's this. I'm like, that's not homeschooling. That's school at home. They're not the same. But yeah, they're super different, and legally they're like different legal statuses.
Right.
And when we tell people like homeschooling is a legal status, like when you can go to jail for it, it hits different. When you can go to jail for not doing what you say you're going to do with your children, you know, it's like, oh, this has consequences.
Right.
So yeah, that's super important. And I was actually just looking that up the other day, trying to learn more about it.
The alternative schools of choice?
Yeah.
I'll
It's very vague.
One question.
I'll put my
Yes, ma'am.
email.
Is it me?
Yes.
Oh, my question was, how would you go about if you're finding that you don't like the distance learning at all? One of my children does it seamlessly. The other one, they're moving so slow. He's so bored. With the independent study, I'm not sure, like in Elk Grove, we have different options, but I don't know about the K through 12 virtual academy. So that was
You
my
send them
question.
to your big sister's house.
I know.
That's my little sister, y'all. Honestly, K-12 is not for DJ. As somebody who knows DJ, it would be worse for distance. It is more structured than the distance learning. He would not be happy with K-12. He really needs a model that allows him to be super hands-on and to get all of his energy out, because he's super athletic, runs everywhere, jumps everywhere, needs a lot of sensory input. So for DJ, especially because he's so young, you could easily do a PSA for him and then put him back if the goal is not to homeschool him long term, because he's only going into what, the first grade, second grade?
He's second grade, but this like 8 to 1:45 on Zoom
it's too much.
It's too much.
You know, the other option is to opt him out of every subject except for English and math.
I like that.
Where like you say you're going to supplement everything else. If they ask about curriculum, I own all the curriculum on the planet, and the curriculum that I don't own, Ginger owns. And just do the English and math, which should cut his day significantly.
Yeah.
Because everything else he'll get, because, you know, you guys live in a very enriching environment. So it's not like he's in an environment where he's not getting social science understanding, where he's not getting history understanding, where he's not getting science, things like that. Oh, Ginger just said, Tiffany, he can have a FaceTime with Xavier and they can play and jump around together. They have very similar personalities in terms of their energy level.
Anna Jaya, add her.
Yeah, so we can make a virtual Zoom pod for them just to like have a ball. So yeah, I would definitely seek that out. If you have a kid who is, you know, very high energy, trampoline, an indoor trampoline.
$40 on Amazon.
$40. I got the one that was like $110 because it has the
bar.
It has the bar and the net.
Yeah.
Because my kid is the one who like jump out the net and hit his head on something, but then you got the net, so you come back in, and she'll literally sit in there and jump and do her facts. Or when she's learning her reading group, where she's like, is, am, are, was, were, being, been, has, had, dude, and she just jumps because she needs that sensory input. And sometimes she'll be in class with other kids jumping on the trampoline on the Zoom. And the option is she's going to do it that way or she's not going to be online. So again, as educators, we work for you. It's not the other way around. Yeah. Brandon, you had a question?
I was before him, Miss Cherina.
I'm sorry. Zoom does not put this in order, and it moves the screens around.
We're not going to argue. Tanya, go right ahead.
Okay, yes. So Teach and Sped, I have had those sessions where I've had my children. I will tell the parents, put them on the trampoline, turn the camera to them. We're going to do this session while they jump or while they jump rope. And it has gone so much easier. It's no struggle for me, no struggle for the scholar or the parents. Like they can actually leave the room while we're still sitting on Zoom doing our session. So yes, that trampoline, like I said, $40 on Amazon, you get a personal one. It's amazing. But my question is,
throw some balls
to
in
supplement their
throw balls in the trampoline, and then they're even more stimulated when the balls bounce and when they bounce.
Oh, okay. Yep, I will do that. Okay, my question is to supplement their education. So if they're online for math and English, and then you're going to supplement everything else. So in Arizona, I know for California, you get X amount of money per student per semester. How do we find the information for Arizona? So if we say we're only going to put her online for this and this, and we're
I
going
don't
to
believe
supplement.
you get it in Arizona.
Excuse me?
I don't believe Arizona has homeschool funding.
Okay.
California is a unicorn with homeschool
That was
funding.
my question. Okay.
It's pretty much California, sometimes Florida, sometimes Nevada.
Gotcha.
That's it, unless something has changed in the last 6 months.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to popcorn to Mr. Brandon.
Mr. Brandon.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So at this point in time, we have filed the private school affidavit for Jada. The next step that the Homeschool Legal Defense Association is talking about is submitting the letter to withdraw Jada from school, and then as the private-based or as the home-based private school, sending a letter to the school to ask for her complete file and whatnot.
I asked for the file before.
Oh, makes sense, right? Because why would we respond to you when you're no longer with us? Yeah, makes sense.
Well, and you can sometimes get more information because
Sure, because you're still a student, so you still owe me.
So, and what you do is you go in and bang on the door and tell them you want the whole file.
So don't send a letter, go up there.
I mean, you're going to have a letter also.
Okay.
But the difference in the file that they give you when you just ask for a file and then the file when you're like, give me the whole file.
Right. We'll send you whatever we want to versus, well, you're standing here in front of us, you're going to check this out.
Right. Like, I'm watching you pull it off and I'm like,
You think that they're not going to give you that whole file if I walk up in there and tell them I want her whole file? Is that what you think?
Well, that's what Cherina was just saying, walking up in there versus sending a letter. Okay, so
well, I knew your wife was going to walk in there and get the file. I didn't have to tell her that.
Yeah, that is a given. So my question is related to the next steps, because of course, there's one frame of thinking that I'm thinking, of course, like, because Summers River College is right down the road. So, in terms of a program and tracking attendance and
I don't suggest Consumnus.
Okay.
Consumnus is not a big fan of young people.
Okay.
In terms of high school students, because Consumnus is already impacted junior college.
Okay.
And high school students always have the last priority of registration.
Okay.
The college that I do suggest is a distance away. If you have to go up there ever, it only maybe once a semester, and it's worth the 2-hour drive.
What college is that?
In Columbia. It's in Sonora.
Okay. I was about to say in New York. Okay.
No, Columbia in Sonora. And it is affiliated with Modesto JC. So they get all the classes that Columbia offers, and they get all of the classes that Modesto JC offers. And the difference in Columbia and all the other schools, for example, is Columbia welcomes young people with like joy.
That's good.
They allow them to join EOP as high school students, which is unheard of. So when we brought them to Delta, they were like, we don't do that. And I was like, but they're already in EOP. So they had to be grandfathered in. They have the single best English teacher I've ever met in life.
The single best what?
English teacher.
Okay.
Her name is Dr. Kimberly Pippa Thompson.
Okay. P. Okay.
And she teaches English 1A, 1B, and 1C. And then they have another English teacher who teaches Intro to College English. He's hard, but he's good.
Yep.
And it's the only B any one of my kids have ever gotten. But the child went from barely constructing positive sentences to being able to write with this class. And actually, like, her grade came because me and him had a fight about a comma. He was like, a comma doesn't go there. I was like, well, technically, a comma can go there, a semicolon can go there, a period can go there. And him and I had it out. He fixed her grade over that comma. Because, you know, there are new comma rules. Like new math, there's new, like, English rules. They don't want commas after words with and all kind of. They're just making stuff up. And I'm like, you can't change the rules and then tell me to help them. Like, because it's English. It's supposed to stay the same. But they have really amazing teachers, and they want the children because it's a small campus. And as our kids get a little bit older, it's one of the only junior colleges in California with dorms.
Well, I mean, we're going to, you know, she's going to be here.
Well, you know what? I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay.
Because, imagine this. Your kid is still enrolled in high school, right?
Yes.
You're at a California junior college.
Yes.
Your kid wants to graduate early, and you're like, yeah, no. But because junior college is free for high school students and that one has a dorm, you can kind of have the best of both experiences. So we're not just looking at like right now.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But think about when they're between that 17, 18-year-old kind of range and maybe not quite ready.
Right.
And they do that without losing their standing as a freshman going to university. Because remember, if you graduate and go to the JC, you no longer apply as a freshman. You have to apply as a transfer, which is much harder. So it's just the food for thought.
Yeah. So what was the name of that professor for the intro to college?
I don't remember. There's only one.
There's only one guy, or there's only one intro to college?
There's only one intro to college professor. His name is like Tony something. I blocked it out. It was traumatic.
Gotcha.
That comma got to me.
At him. Tony something. Okay, I'll make sure and look him up. Okay, so let's talk about. Okay, let's say she goes. Let's just assume, right? She goes to Columbia in Sonora, right? Okay. She goes and she gets an AA in general education, liberal studies, right? I figured that at that point in time, that would qualify us as the home-based private school to say, well, hey, you've got your AA, so you've definitely accomplished a high school diploma. So no. Okay.
Now, can you do it? Absolutely.
Okay.
It's going to be all about keeping records.
Sure.
It's going to be about keeping records and maintaining the thing. So what I suggest is that you get a copy of the state standards, which I have in my house. You're welcome to come get them and copy them because we keep binders of them. And get a copy of the course catalog for Elk Grove Unified because that's your home district.
Right.
When you write your courses, you're going to use theirs.
Gotcha.
Because those have already been approved from the state and they're far less likely to be challenged if they're nearly identical.
Sure. So essentially match the course catalog for EGUSD over at Columbia, Sonora to say, okay, take this so that this can equate.
No, you don't have to have Columbia, Sonora in that at all.
Okay.
So what you're going to do is, let's say she goes, right? So she's a sophomore this year, correct?
Yeah.
So she's finished English 9, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So she's going into English 10.
Yeah.
So let's say in the fall she takes English 95, which is the intro to college English, right? That is worth 5 college credits, even though the 5 are not transferable because it's an intro class. But 5 college credits is 16 credits of high school English. So in that one semester, she's now finished a year and a half of English.
Boom. Nice.
Let's say in the spring, she takes English 1A.
Yeah.
That's a 3-credit class. That is now 1 year of math. Or excuse me, of English.
I got you. Track.
So now that is a whole nother year.
Yep.
So now she, in terms of English, is through all the way with 11th grade English. And then let's say summer, she's going to take a 6-week summer class, English 1B. She's now finished all of her English by the end of her sophomore year for graduation.
Yep.
And she's completed her college English sequence.
Yep, that's what I'm talking about.
So, like, even if you only chose one college class or two college classes a semester, because if you're going to do that, if you're going to choose English, choose a fun college class. If you're going to have them do a second, don't throw her in English and math at the same time.
Sure.
I know you.
Right.
And you're trying.
You know her.
No, because she listens to me.
I listen to.
Tell him to have grace with this child.
Have grace with our child.
And can he de-school first?
He has a lot of de-schooling to do.
I keep trying to tell him, help him out.
The next question.
Pray for him. Help
the
him out.
next question.
You're going to have to pay her for her expertise. We ain't about to take up all her time with your foolishness.
No.
Tanya, you got a question?
So related to I'm still kind of at a disconnect between the course catalog and Columbia. Where does the course catalog factor into the
because you have to create her transcript.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And in order to have a transcript, when you get a transcript, the registrar of any college that she applies to might ask for the course catalog for the classes that she's taken.
Gotcha. Okay. And so then we would just show EGUSD, even though she didn't go to EGUSD.
No. You're going to create your own and use that as a template.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because you are a school now.
Yep, that's right.
Even though maybe if we can get with Yvonne, we can figure out how to do a school of choice, but not under EGUSD because they're a pain in the butt to deal with.
Gotcha. So my other question is related to
can you get somebody else
ACT and SAT. If some colleges now are not even requiring it, the UC system is talking about developing its own standardized testing. Is there any point to ACT and ACT?
I would always say take it, but don't stress it.
Okay.
Like, our kid did not do great on them. We thought that was going to be what held her back. But actually what ended up being more important than any given test score was, and she's coming out if you guys have any questions for a kid who's now a teen, who's now an adult. Oh my God. So I would say take them. They were not her strength. What was the strength was the diversity of her curriculum vitae. Was the fact that she could say, I'm a doula, the fact that she could say, I have a business, the fact that she could say, I'm a coder, I'm a designer, I'm this, I'm that. If your child's curriculum vitae looks like everybody else, can you move a chair over there for her? If it looks like everybody else's and they have mediocre or average test scores, it's kind of like, But if they're exceptional in terms of what they do outside of the classroom, then it definitely makes a huge difference. And I know now ACT is starting to super score, which is huge. And super scoring, for those of you who don't know, is if you take a test in April and a test in September and a test in November, they take your highest from each test to create your score. So if you have an ELA and a math and a science, and one day you do great in this and one day you do great in that, but really do bad in the other, they take your highest from each one to create your composite score. So, Michaela, what is the question?
Really quick, Cherina. I know that folks jumped on her and this was supposed to be an hour. Cherina's gracious enough to extend her time. But if you have to go, we do understand this will be available for replay on our website. So if you do have to go, we understand. But please go ahead and continue, Cherina.
Yeah. So Tanya, you had a question? No. Okay. So my Michaela's here. Everybody say hey, Michaela. Michaela is a freshman at the University of California, Berkeley. And I'm super proud of her because I get to say she's a freshman at the University of California, Berkeley, and it's the #1 private institution or public institution in the country. So I'm here for that because I get to be mom bragging a little bit. But I told her I was doing this, and I know sometimes people want to know what it's like for a kid who's been through these programs. And Michaela specifically has literally done K-12. She's done connections. She's done homeschool traditionally. She's done school at home traditionally. And then we ultimately unschooled her. Her college essay was actually about the transitioning and the difficulty that she had transitioning between homeschooling and unschooling, because ultimately she became an unschooler. So Michaela, you want to tell them your experience real quick and then answer a question or two? What is this about? Just alternative education choices. You have to speak louder though.
I don't know which specifically was mine because I don't think I was fully unschooled.
No, because you didn't start until freshman year.
Because when I began, my mentor teacher at the time was a traditional schooler, Catholic private school teacher.
Wellesley. She graduated from Wellesley.
And then there was my mom, who was the unschooler. So I don't think I was fully unschooled up until maybe my senior year is when. Senior, it was more like I didn't really have anything else to do.
You were done.
Yeah. But it was a good experience. It's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
who do you think it's for?
It's for like people like Sunny who actually, know how to do things and research things by themselves. Because like me, I can't do unschooling in certain subjects. Like I'm not the type of person that would just go out and do an essay just for a reason, whereas my sister would. But yeah, there's a lot of options.
So would you say learning to research things is the most important thing to learn when you're starting?
Yeah, that is the most important things to learn. Like yesterday I had public speaking class and it was like an impromptu talk, and then I was the only one that had mine fully researched and like
Impromptu?
Yeah, impromptu.
My kid researches impromptu talks. Okay.
Okay. And I was the only one that had theirs fully researched in like the 45 minutes, and the professor was very impressed. So yeah.
So
what were the cons?
The cons to homeschooling in general or unschooling?
Just her experience overall.
What were the difficult parts? And I've already said that we had difficulties when I was learning to deschool, so you can share freely.
So, of course, the difficult part is the fact that you guys have to, and the kids have to get used to the fact that it's not only your parent, but your teacher. Something that we're still struggling with sometimes.
How?
Just, yeah.
Well, no, because you want me to be your teacher, and I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I was already socially awkward before.
I mean, it's just you're quirky.
But I think it got kind of worse. I think Dad would agree I got more socially awkward.
I don't think you were always really awkward. Always.
Yeah. Maybe the biggest one is that it's something that is struggling transitioning is the fact that you can't just get, because I personally am the type of learning that would just knock everything out. You can't really do that in college. Mm-hmm. You have to do something like overall, whereas in college, you can't just spend one day on this or maybe like a whole week on this specific subject, whereas the other.
What about managing your time as a homeschooler without your parents managing it for you?
It's a difficult one because I can't really explain what I did.
Well, what tools were important? If you had to tell them what tools to get for their kids for them to be successful, what tools would you suggest?
Maybe.
And not just organization, just period.
A timer would probably.
So a timer?
Like probably the easiest one, especially because I was always on and off on my planner.
Do you suggest a planner?
I suggest a planner. It's just personally for me, it was helpful, but I got commitment issues to certain things.
Okay.
So I was just a planner, but it's good to like know that something is done, like something is due on this date, because I wouldn't use it, but I remember that something has to be done by this date.
What is the best math app for like help? Like if you need help learning something, what's the best math app?
Like in terms of calculations or?
In terms of understanding how to do it.
Oh, that's easy. Khan Academy.
So the best math app for understanding the fundamentals or the foundations, Khan. And what about the best math app for like helping with calculations?
So that would be Mathway.
Mathway.
Easily.
So mathway.com.
And don't be afraid to get homework resources from sites such as, I forgot one of the Chegg sites. Just use a different email. Don't use your school email.
Don't use your school email.
No, because Chegg will actually keep track of which like the school emails, then send it to the school.
Yeah.
And then there was this one homework site that I used, which is in the homework site. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's almost free, not fully. Like if you input some of your old assignments in, then they will take that instead of you paying for it.
And that's where they can like double check against their math.
Yeah.
What's the best English resource?
English. Grammarly, and then a bibliography creator.
So Grammarly, GRAMMERLY.com. You can add it as an app on your phone and on your computer, right?
Yeah, and then a bibliography creator. Because personally, I've never created a bibliography.
From scratch?
No.
You avoided it like the plague. You guys, anyone have questions for her? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Easy day today. Anyone have any questions for me?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a daughter who is going into 9th grade. We have homeschooled most of her life. She did 7th grade at a traditional public school. We're in Southern California.
Okay.
So we actually homeschooled through a small school district, the Wiseburn School District, for a very long time. And we did 1 year there with their public school system. So most of the time her kindergarten year, we did K-12, Nightmare. Then we did the same school that she graduated from, which was Da Vinci, which, you know, is a hybrid. It's a homeschooling hybrid where she was going 2 days a week and then the rest of the days at home, which was incredible. Project-based learning. And we actually kind of like when we're at home, did things our own way. So this past year, they created a college high school hybrid where she has the option of getting her AA or BA through Southern New Hampshire University while she's also in high school. I'm just kind of trying to see from your perspective what you think the benefits to that would be, or if you think that would really even be beneficial in that type of setting.
Thinking whole child, I wouldn't do it. Only because I feel like if you're going to enroll your kid in the JC like we did, a big part of the benefit of that is them being allowed to explore. When they have the hybrid programs like that, they are very much on a schedule to graduate when they are supposed to graduate. And that takes a lot of the exploration out of it and adds a lot of pressure to it.
Okay.
So it's just it's a different level and layer of anxiety that is now added to it. Whereas you can enroll on your own with no problem.
Of course.
They may get their BA, like Michaela, she just left, but she's only 2 classes from her BA.
Right.
But if 3 years ago I said, oh, you have to get your BA, she probably wouldn't have done it, or wouldn't have done it with as much joy, because now you're adding that pressure and anxiety. And at the end of the day, she's 17 and she's basically going to be a junior in the spring.
Yes.
So what is the point? Do I really want my 18-year-old with the BA and grown?
Right.
I don't. Because I want them to slow down, because I am somebody who went to college young, and it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot, and I wasn't as ready as emotionally as I should have been. Academically, I was okay. So there are pros and cons. It depends on what your kid wants. If your kid's like, oh, I want to be an astrophysicist, maybe that could be a good thing because you have like 20 years of school ahead of you.
Right.
But if your kid's like, oh, I want to be a teacher, do you really want them to have to like be looking at walking into a classroom and teaching at 20, 21? I started teaching at 21.
Wow, that's neat.
And I walked into high school class. So,
hey,
yeah, like I'm turning 40 this year, and some of my students are on this call with their high schoolers or with their middle schoolers now, like teaching. And I'm like, this is crazy, because I basically grew up with my kids, and it was a lot. And do I regret it? No. Would things have been very different if I allowed myself to slow down? Yeah. So I personally, with my kids, because you know your kids better than anyone, none of my kids are emotionally in the space where they're just ready to adult.
Right.
And to me, having degrees that young, it equates to adulting.
Yeah. And so I had a conversation with the principal and a couple of the administrators at the school to just find out, okay, so I get that, you know, she can get an AA, she can get an BA, but what if, you know, at a certain point, you know, we figure that she is going too fast, she's doing too much, and she's not really enjoying the experience, which for me is, you know, especially as someone who's, you know, basically homeschooled her whole life and gave her, you know, the freedom to be able to learn in a joyous surrounding, and she's enjoyed it so much. What does that look like? And so they do have an option where if she does not, you know, decide that she wants to stay on the quote unquote fast track that we're speaking of now, she actually does have the option to stay within that same system inside of the program until she's 23.
Okay. What does she think?
She wants to do it. And
well, the thing is till 23, would she not want a traditional college experience?
Well, you know, originally she was saying that she didn't, but I think that that's because she's been homeschooled for most of her life. She's only had that 1 year, you know, of middle school, and, you know, it wasn't the best experience because middle school is tricky. You know, sometimes when you have, you know, the children and, you know, especially now, you know, a lot of kids in traditional middle schools, they are, you know, there's a lot of exposure to a lot of things that, you know, some kids are not really necessarily used to. So she doesn't really care about the social part.
What I would do is split it down the middle.
Okay.
With further thought, okay. I would do it and I would register for the AA.
Okay. Okay.
Because that'd be less intense than the BA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is still have her finishing when she's 17, 18.
Exactly.
She'll still be able to go into a university as a freshman with junior credits, because that's key.
Yes.
You don't want them going in as a junior because freshmen have different supports. They're guaranteed to dorms. So you can go in as a freshman with the credits of a junior. And then what will happen is the second semester, all those other credits will be tacked on, and then they'll be given junior status.
Got it.
While having the supports of a freshman. So she'll have the benefits of both. That's personally what I would do for my kid. And if they fall short, they still have extra credits going into college.
Absolutely. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I thought I saw a hand, but now I don't.
For your Arizona folks, person she's on.
What was the Arizona question?
No, Is it the person from Arizona?
Oh, Miss Summer. I don't think so. She just emailed me.
All right.
Was that it?
I think you saw DJ fly across the stream.
Hi, DJ.
Hello.
That's my nephew, y'all. So yeah, hopefully this helped ease some of the anxiety in knowing that there are options. There are options within public school. There are options within private school. There are options within homeschool. And you can do this. You are enough to teach your children. Oh, one more thing to note. Most kids are not optimal learners from 8 a.m. to 2. They're not. Most of our kids really get up and start doing their best work right around 10, 11 o'clock. And their best work is actually done in the middle of the night. Some of them, if they write a paper at noon and then they write a paper at midnight, it looks like 2 different people wrote the paper because their mind is functioning optimally at the middle of the night. So understand that while your children are working at home, it might not look like a normal schedule. And in Waldorf education, we call it rhyme and reason because we honor our internal clocks and our personal clocks. So just like some of us are not meant to like have 8 a.m. jobs. Like when I was a teacher, I would tell my boss, don't schedule me for a first period or 0 period class. Them kids not gonna be happy. The parents not gonna be happy. You're not gonna be happy. I'm not gonna be happy. And ironically, most of my bosses appreciated that because they knew like she is not as, don't ask her to teach 0 period. And our kids are human. And because they're whole humans, they may or may not be super functional first thing in the morning. They may or may not be super functional in the evening or in the afternoon. So a good thing to do when you're creating your schedules for your family is kind of watch when they are most focused. And that's when you kind of want to get them into their work and into their work habits. We want to get to know our children personally, which means understanding their internal clocks and understanding when they're optimal, understanding when they are not optimal. So I have one kid, Kendall, I can get her to do all the work first thing in the morning because she wakes up like clockwork. Sydney, don't ask her to think about anything before noon because she's not there yet. Michaela, now that she's getting a little older, she's good about 7 a.m. But before that, like up until what, maybe 6 months ago? Yeah. Up until 6 months ago, Michaela was not worth anything until after 2 p.m. So it kind of changes. So definitely like take that into account when you're planning your day, because something that is done at a non-optimal period can take 2 or 3 times longer than when it's done at an optimal period. Like we have done a worksheet where I'm so frustrated and she's so frustrated that he comes home from work and I'm like, take your kid and help her with this worksheet. And then the very next day she'll do it at her optimal time after we spent 3 hours on one page the night before, and 10 minutes later she's done and it's perfect. Why? Because it respected her clock.